Hey everybody, hope you're all doing well. My name is Steven, and this is the Storytime channel. Today we have some pro-revenge stories, and our first story of the day is by Itchy Sack. You want to use our Netflix? No worries. I absolutely despise my in-laws. They're money-grabbing monsters. Long story short, they nearly made my wife, children, and I homeless a few years ago because of their own greed and see no issues with it. Anyway, I come home after work and my wife had a rubbish day. So I order a takeaway, and we settle for a night of binge-watching TV. Then I see it. My in-laws have profiles on our Netflix. I don't even mention it, but I'm fuming. Those thieving little craps can't even cough up a few pounds a month for Netflix. I talk to my friend about it. He laughs. I rage more. So I set their profiles and kids' profiles, and they can't watch anything higher than you. I also set a password on our profile so they can't go into the settings to change. I'm loving it, swaggering around thinking I'm a champ, showing off my pettiness to the guys at work, telling everyone and anyone who to listen. They've asked my wife about it, she changes it back, and I give it the whole, "My goodness, how on earth has that happened? Must be a system error or something." I change it back again. What a hero I am. I tell everyone a second time how I've effectively ruined their lives now that their viewing options are Paw Patrol and Naughty. Turns out they've been sending my wife the money for Netflix for some time now. I've since changed the viewing settings back to standard. What's your guys' opinions on sharing the Netflix account? Only direct people you've personally given it to, or can some friends of friends all use it too? Let me know in the comments down below. Our next story is by Conscious Ad 4266. Neighbor throws food from second story window. A few years ago, I lived on the second floor of an apartment building that only had 4 units, 2 on the top floor and 2 on the bottom floor. My next door neighbor and I both had gotten puppies around the same age, and so we both started using the surrounding grassy area to take our dogs out. Every tenant had dogs, so everyone used the same grassy area. One day, I noticed a pile of cooked ramen noodles on the grass right next to the building, and hardly stopped my curious puppy from eating what we had found. A few days later, the ramen was still there, but now there was a single dead rose, and what looked like some bread as well. I looked up the side of the building and noticed a fresh rose sitting in a window on the second floor. The window lines up directly with the growing pile, and because our apartments mirror each other, I know that window was my neighbor's kitchen window. So now, I'm almost certain that the next door neighbor is just tossing food scraps out of the kitchen window as if we live in a giant composting bin. At this point, I'm annoyed because I didn't want to have to rush to the vet because my puppy ate a chicken bone or something from the growing food pile. But also, who the freak throws food out of the window like that? So I did the first thing that came to mind. I used the dog poop bags I had on me to scoop up a handful of noodles and then drop the noodles, no bag, directly on my neighbor's doorstep. Never saw any more food out there. If you're living in any kind of apartment living, why would you go and be throwing anything out the window? Especially if you're not on the first floor. There's some real logic missing here for me. This next story is by Unoriginal Use. Tear open our driveway to pour concrete? Fine, you'll probably enjoy having to dig the concrete out of the ground twice. Not about me, but about a guy I used to work with. He was a mountain of a guy, a huge Turk, but the kindest guy I ever met. He'd do anything for people he liked. Nobody ever saw anything get on his bad side until that fateful day. As it happens, he was also our delivery driver, and he spent most days on the road in his semi, leaving before dawn and returning quite late, if at all, that day. Our warehouse had a driveway large enough for him to pull the semi into and load/unload. The supermarket next door decided to do some renovations and expand. When they started construction, they started tearing out their brick parking lot and getting close to tearing out our driveway. Boss runs out, tells them where our property line is, and is assured that they won't cross onto our property. Everybody goes back inside, nobody worries, until there's suddenly a raging bear Turk standing in the break room, shouting about how the driveway has been torn up and he can't get his lorry in. We go out and indeed, the driveway is half missing. and there's a concrete building foundation poured in. Construction workers are nowhere in sight. Boss sends the supermarket manager an email message and everybody goes home. Next day, we arrive to the site of very angry construction workers. Apparently, the delivery driver went back in the middle of the night with some bolt cutters, liberated about 30 of their shopping carts, and stuck them into the drying concrete in various comical positions. Overnight, the concrete hardened, and the carts became quite difficult to remove. Construction crew brings in jackhammers, and 4 days later, most of the concrete is gone, and they start preparing for another pour, this time leaving our driveway intact. Foundation comes out fine, everything is looking good. At that time, my boss shows up with the announcement that he had a survey done, and while they didn't tear open our driveway the second time, they were still closer to our property line than allowed, and he'd already filed a complaint to get the concrete removed. Took them another week of jackhammering to get it out. I feel like there's some questions needing to be answered about what construction company this is that seems to be very willing to ignore all regulation. This next story is by Beagley and Bass. Fired from last job, but I got the last laugh. I worked at a retail chain that sold pet supplies and products. When I started working there, it was great. Family owned, and everyone I worked with was fantastic. The owners eventually wanted to retire and sold the small chain to an investment group. Once the investment group took over, almost all but a few employees were let go, forced out, or just quit. I hung on for a little while longer before I got promoted at my other job. New company brings in new manager to my store. My store was the top performing store in the entire chain, bringing in about $10,000 to $12,000 per day on average. It was always more on weekends and especially around the holidays. The new manager is a Mr. Company man. Company told them they only want employees around for 2 to 3 years. Myself and 2 others had been there for 10 plus years. So naturally, he began ruffling feathers and giving us all a hard time. Unfortunately, he decided on me first. Mr. Company man found out I worked 2 jobs. The 2 jobs are not in related fields, so there was no chance of any conflicts of interest on my end. However, my second job requires me to work nights and weekends. When Mr. Company Man found this out, he demanded I work nights and weekends there, so it was fair for everyone. I didn't work nights and weekends there because I was that store's only OSHA certified forklift operator, and deliveries didn't come at night. They came weekday mornings every day. Mr. Company Man didn't want to hear that and told me I either had to work nights and weekends or that day would be my last day. I told him, "Don't threaten me with a good time. I suppose today's my last day then." I was pretty pissed about that, but it's not a big deal now. Ended up being the greatest thing that ever happened to me. I went home early, didn't finish my shift because freak 'em. But when I got home, I decided to call my local OSHA inspector and report them for not having a certified operator on staff, as well as numerous other hazards. Needless to say, they lost close to 3 weeks' profit from all the violations the inspector found. I was surprised they even showed up. In my state, the inspector will call you back after an inspection and tell you if your claims were founded or not. Mine were, and Mr. Company Man got his butt chewed out so bad, he ended up quitting. That's just uncaring and terrible management to not know what assets you have in the terms of people employed and how to best use their utilities. And our final story of the day is by SGY0003. Steal my design and get all the credits? Enjoy getting kicked off. So my friend over in Korea studies fashion design. She sometimes sends me over the sketches of the designs and they all look amazing. Then again, I'm not into fashion. She's particularly interested in designing handbags and purses. She told me a story about how she shut down one of the most entitled, self-centered, lazy students on campus. Cast: Grace is our main character girl. Jane is the evil one. Professor is the instructor of the course. Story: At first, Grace and Jane got along just fine. They were both interested in similar stuff and quickly became BFFs. Grace decided to show Jane her sketches and designs for handbags and purses, and Jane was so impressed by it because the sketches were in incredible detail, including all the patterns and sew lines coupled with figurative measurements. Even Professor was impressed by it. And since it was no surprise that Grace got a high mark on their first major exam, Jane didn't do so well and practically followed Grace everywhere to get pointers on how to do better. So Grace decided to help her out. Unfortunately, Jane turned out to be one of the most entitled, lazy, and selfish people that Grace has ever met. Things that Jane did to piss Grace off included, but are not limited to, not paying attention, being late on their study session, never showed appreciation, didn't pay for coffee or snack, complaining annoyingly about how hard it was to draw something. Grace pretty much gave up on her after a week, refusing to meet Jane outside of her class. Time went by, and for their midterm, everyone in the class had to do a presentation on the stuff they had designed. When it was Jane's turn, Grace was shocked to see Jane had stolen one of her designs. Thankfully, Grace had multiple designs going on, so there were no conflicts when it was her turn to present. But she was seething with rage. Grace had a meeting with the professors afterwards, and the professor knew what was going on, but couldn't really do anything with Jane because it turns out she was the daughter of the chairman, or one of the major investors. Grace said she can't recall. The chairman apparently blackmailed the professor into giving Jane the best grades. The revenge professor did, however, help Grace devise a plan to humiliate and expose Jane. For the finals, the professor announced to the class that they would do another presentation, but it would be 3 designs, and advised they had to bring their A games, because professionals from industries would be grading their work, and the head of the department and chairman would be there as well. So you know how Grace had a bunch of sketches for the class? Well, Grace also had a separate sketchbook that had designs from major brands. MK, Coach, you name it. She never used these directly for class assignments, but rather as inspirations for her designs. Grace pretended to be all friendly with Jane again and brought the other sketchbook on their meetings. Still putting up with all the problems mentioned above, Grace secretly worked tirelessly on her new design and did her best to keep it a secret from Jane. So the day of the final presentation arrives and Grace and Professor are grinning because they know what is about to happen. Grace went first and she got a lot of praise from the judges. After a few more presentations, the last one to go was Jane. Jane's presentation turned out to be another copycat, copying designs of not 1, not 2, but 3 different companies. After the presentation, this was how it all went down, at least according to Grace. Judge 1 says, "So you are saying you designed all these by yourself, right?" Jane says that's right. "And you swear that it was really your design and didn't copy off from anything else, right?" Jane says, "I swear." The judge says, "You are aware your designs are from 3 brands?" Jane says, "Huh? Are you aware that these are on market right now and some of the most popular designs?" Jane says, "Wait, hold on." Judge 2 says, "Yeah, I was going to bring this up. If you had worked for any brands, you would have probably been fired or, worst case, sued." Jane says, "But..." Judge 2 said, "Please. I am not done yet. Did you honestly think this would work? We, the judges, have been in the industry for over 10 years. We know a copycat when we see it." Jane says, "But these aren't even my designs. They're from Grace." Judge 3 says to Grace, "Is this true?" Grace says, "Yes, but I'd never use them for major projects nor call them my work. I just use sketches of them as inspirations for my own designs." Judge 3 says, "Well, that was clear from your presentation." Turning back to Jane, "Now, Miss Jane, this is a clear case of plagiarism, and I do hope your school is merciful on this matter." After the presentation was over, the chairman screamed at the professor in front of everyone, not realizing he just revealed all the blackmailing and secret grade deal. Jane tried to call out Grace on how "you screwed me over," but it really didn't matter. No one listened to Jane's attempt and slander and was kicked out of the school. Chairman pretty much lost all support and had to resign, and was replaced by a far more honorable and competent one. Isn't it sad when somebody you thought would be a friend goes and just uses your work as a platform to boost their career or attempt to? You kinda knew that they weren't going to make it too far when Grace was able to get all these designs of very, very popular brands, and Jane was just completely oblivious to it. I imagine somebody who's truly immersed in that field probably would have recognized those designs. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. So if you have a favorite story of the day, let me know which story and why in the comments down below. But besides that, if you enjoyed the video, please consider giving it a like, and if you haven't, subscribe and turn notifications on so you'll never miss an upcoming video. No matter what you do, whether it's just viewing the video, liking, subscribing, turning notifications on, I appreciate the heck out of it. Every little thing that you do helps the channel grow that much more, and I can't thank you enough for it. So until next time, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll be right here next time on the Storytime channel.